Hi, today we have Rishabh Verma, co-founder and CEO of NavGurukul. It's a non-profit. We'll dive into the details of what it does, how it does, what problem is it solving, how is it solving that, what is the uniqueness of their model, what hurdles have they faced during this short timeline of their journey towards making this non-profit a great success. Thank you so much, Rishabh, for joining us. I want to start from the beginning in terms of your background, your education background, and where, at what point in time did you basically make that shift from, let's say, a corporate to a NGO life?
So if I look back at my journey, I think I was really interested in how to code back in school. I mean, it was like a thing that I got to create a lot of things on my own as a teenager. I mean, life was pretty boring back in school and otherwise. So there was some interesting bit of it. And that was also a time where I was really fascinated by these startup icons, especially Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, and the likes of these. And that's how I got into the journey of building a startup. So I dropped out after class 10th because I was anyways very disillusioned and disenchanted by the schooling system. I didn't think that I got to express myself at all. And mostly the way, coming from a middle class Indian family, school was sold to me was not that it's a place to learn things. Like, it was mostly like a place where you go so that you can start making money when you turn 22, 23, you can have a nice fancy job. And I was like, if I can do that right now, what's the whole point of going to school? I mean, learning as an activity really struck me post leaving school. I mean, there's this really nice Carl Sagan quote, I might not be quoting it properly, like that college is for fun. Like, if you want to study, go to a library. So I mean, that what learning is, that really hit me after that. So I started a startup, but I think one question which really remained in my heart since the starting of my life actually, I mean, I can, as early as I remember when I was 6-7 years old, was the sort of disparity that exists in the world. So I saw a lot of disparity, and in spite of coming from a middle class family, I think I still had access to a lot of privilege which so many people around me did not. And I was like, why do I have it while so many people do not? Like, what's the reason behind it? And that question sort of irked me always. And even when I was working on a air boot, solving some of the most cutting edge machine learning problems, having a really nice intellectual high while doing that, the biggest issue was that, I mean, there's so much disparity in the world, and what am I doing to solve it? I mean, this still seems like a very superficial problem which I'm solving. But I continued with it for a couple of years. Even after quitting Airboot, which was the first startup I was running, I consulted and led certain startups before actually making a switch into the non-profit world. It was probably somewhere around 2014, 2015. End of 2014, starting of 2015, where I was like, okay, this is the time, I'm not doing this anymore. Let me start and think, like, how do I go ahead from there? What are the other opportunities which I can explore? And I started volunteering with a couple of nonprofits. I started working with a few nonprofits, and there a couple of things struck me. One of the things that struck me really hard was that I didn't see people having a lot of hope. When I went on ground, talked to a lot of people and asked them, what do you want to be? Tum kya karna chahte ho? There would be answers like an accountant, or there'll be answers like a receptionist. I mean, they're great jobs, but the whole point is, like, can we dream of something bigger? Like, everyone doesn't need to be an astronaut. Everyone doesn't need to be, I don't know, a fashion stylist, but can we just have big dreams? And there was no one I saw having dreams because there was just no hope. Like, they just thought that even if we work hard, there's nothing coming out of it. Even the students, I saw so many students from government schools who are academic achievers. And in spite of that, when you ask them, they really didn't see any hope in spite of getting a small job somewhere or the other. That was one problem. And the other problem, which also really irked me, was if you ask me, Rishabh, how do you think of higher education for your younger brother? I would have a very nice liberal arts college kind of an image where he gets to explore himself, where he learns about life, where he also gets some skill to financially sustain himself. But the moment I ask you, okay, how do we think of higher education for your maid son? The image would be, how do we give them enough to feed their bellies, not to feed their dreams? So it is like this whole idea of how do we give them hope, plus also build an alternative which I would build for my younger brother. And sort of it was a combination of these two questions, which was like, okay, probably NavGurukul is some form of an answer to that.
And tell me something. So when take us through the whole concept of NavGurukul in terms of how do you select students, what students go through, and in the end, once they sort of try and get a job, only then they are called as graduate of NavGurukul, right? Yeah. Just take us through the whole value chain.
So basically, to begin with, I think why we chose, I would like to talk about why we chose software engineering. So while building NavGurukul, the idea was that there are a lot of there was this really interesting line which we used to use, that genius is equally distributed all across the world. The opportunities are not. So there are smart folks from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Silicon Valley to Zambia to Thailand, everywhere. But probably the opportunities only exist for people who have a certain sense of privilege and who come from certain geographical backgrounds. So the idea was that how do we get access to the opportunities to geniuses all across? There are geniuses in the slums in Delhi. There are geniuses who are the sons and daughters of farms, of marginal farmers in Madhya Pradesh. How do we get access to them? There are geniuses in the form of transgenders. There are geniuses in the form of people from lower castes, minority religions. How do we get across them? And that's where the idea of NavGurukul started, that what is one skill which we can teach them, which can help us get out of that cycle and get out real quick. And that's where software engineering was an answer, that it's a skill, it's an industry where people don't really care for degrees. I myself don't have a degree, but I think that was never a challenge to get ahead in my career. The challenge was always my hard work, my inspiration. It was always around me. It was never because I don't have a particular set of people. So you don't need a degree. The industry is not biased if you know a particular, if you have a degree or if you have a piece of paper. It's the only bias that exists is how well do you know how to code. And you don't need great language skills to do that. You don't need great mathematical skills to do that. You just need sheer grit and determination. And we figured out how do we find 100, 150 such people across the country, teach them how to code for a year, and then get them placed into high-paying jobs. That was the major concept. Now, how do we do that? We partner with a lot of non-profits all across the country. We ourselves don't have a nice grassroots reach ourselves because we're an organization which still exists only in Dharamshala and Bangalore. We partner with non-profits across the country. Currently we have partners in almost 20 different states across India. We see the kind of they help us identify the best kind of students who might be good fits for this program, plus who also need this program the most. We have some internal filters in the form of a test, a few interviews, which everything happens on the telephone, and before we select the student. But we reach out to the students through the non-profit. Then the whole selection procedure is led by the current students at NavGurukul. So if I am a student and you're just applying for the program, I will be the one who will be interviewing you. Who will be basically making the final decision if Ankit needs to come in or not. And I think that's a lot of activities around this whole year are designed on a similar approach where the ownership is taken by the students. So from selecting the incoming batch to cooking food to cleaning toilets to actually making sure that the mentorship of the incoming batch is happening, and if Ankit is coming in today, he is actually reaching a nice stage where he can go and get a job. That's actually the responsibility of the outgoing batch. So there's a lot of peer learning that happens, and you're thrown into places where you need to take up a lot of ownership and do things on your own, basically. And instead of actually theoretically learning things, from day one, we learn by doing practical things. So whether it's knowing how to code or it's actually dealing with certain social issues, there's a lot of practical focus on working on them and then going about it. So in terms of, if you specifically ask in terms of software engineering, from day one they start building things. So first week they might be building something very simple like a Kaun Banega Karodpati game in a very simple form, to the 52nd week, by the end of their 1 year, they might be building complex e-commerce applications, complex chat platforms, and this and that. But they focus on building very practical things before going ahead and graduating out of the program.
So you talked about that students are the owners, right? So that basically will be very good point for developing their other skills as well. Let's say the leadership skills or managing the other people managers or so. So have you seen students or do you evaluate students outside of the software engineering as well before they are moving out during the whole curriculum 1 year? Are there any evaluations or so where you basically stamp them that yes, this person has been evaluated on these many parameters or so?
So I think in terms of evaluation specifically, we try not to have a lot of evaluations on anything within the program. And the reason behind that is like I think everyone within NavGurukul starts from a different starting point. There are people who from schools where teachers never showed up. There are people from schools where teachers took immense ownership and they groomed the students really well. There are students who are BTech pass outs, there are students who are 8th dropouts. So in such kind of a diversity, evaluating them in terms of where they are specifically, I don't think is the most appropriate thing to do, because then it's like expecting like a normal system that everyone passes out of class 7th at the same time. I might have better English, you might have better math, and we should be dealt with in that way. But we do a lot of input based evaluation. So we see that how much work are they putting in. So there are certain students who might not have, certain students who are typically more introverted, who haven't displayed any form of leadership skills because they didn't get the opportunity to where they are right now. They might be displaying less leadership skills versus students who are coming from a very extroverted background and who have displayed a lot of leadership skills. So we just try to see that where they started and where they are right now, and if the delta is high enough, that's good. But I think there are a lot of different opportunities which are created in the campus every time to hone their leadership skills in a way that every 3 months there are council elections which happen. So from taking care of the food and hygiene at the campus to training and placements to taking care of the kitchen to taking care of the maintenance of the campus to the person who's responsible for the outreach. All these are elected posts within the campus, and complete ownership of this is on the students. So it's the training and placements council member with a whole bunch of students and alums which actually decides the learning direction of the whole campus for the next 3 months. And this is done by a student himself or herself. So these opportunities are created almost every day in different forms, shapes and sizes to give them opportunities for to give them opportunities to hone their leadership skills.
So, I mean, how many teachers are there? I would say that this is one model where we can actually say that the teachers are only enablers. Right. Everything is done by the students themselves, right? So what is that ratio and what is it that teachers are doing? Because as I hear more about what students are doing, I'm getting a sense that students are sort of running the whole show, right, not the teachers.
Right. So, yeah, there are no teachers per se. We have a couple of facilitators in both the campuses. Currently, in the Bangalore campus, we have one facilitator. In the Dharamshala campus, we have one facilitator. Both these facilitators, and in the Dharamshala campus, the facilitator is from NavGurukul itself. Like Nitesh is the guy who leads the Dharamshala campus right now. He passed out of the NavGurukul program a year back and now he's leading it. So he really understands the problems of the community. I mean, sometimes when I see him, I think he gives 10x better solutions than even what I can, being the founder of the organization, because he really has gone through that system. He really understands the problems. And in terms of facilitators, their major role is to sort of ensure the overall happiness of the place and also a lot of conflict resolution and general culture setting. But actual day-to-day heavy lifting is what is done by the students themselves. And in terms of teachers, so if you ask in the form of a traditional teacher model, how many teachers are there? The answer would be probably none, or there's one facilitator in the form of one facilitator for every 40, 50, 60 students. But I think another answer of it could be like there are at least like probably 40, 50, 60 teachers that exist in the system in the form of students who mentor each other, in the form of a lot of support from the alumni. I mean, the moment a student has done 8-9 months in the system and she needs to be prepared for interviews, before actually going and sitting for interviews, alums single-handedly take care and mentor them, basically. And currently we have around 80 alums in the whole system, and they're the ones who are actually powering the campus. So there's a lot of informal mentorship that happens all across this thing, and there's collective ownership taken by everyone, and it's not just one single person who's responsible for it.
Tell me something in terms of all these students will be Gen Z or millennials, right? And they need instant gratification. They need to basically be owning stuff by themselves, which I think to some extent you're already doing. But I have also, because I also love coding, and I know few of my friends, they have a mental block in terms of, hey, I can't code. So how have you been able to solve that problem?
So I think that mental block with coding really does exist. I've seen it in a lot of places around me, that the moment you're talking about those characters going on the black screen, it just seems scary. And I think the way the modern movies have made a picture of coding, it seems even more scary. So we try to work on those mental blocks in a couple of ways. The first step is during the evaluation of actually getting a student in, we try to evaluate the logical aptitude of the student in certain ways to see that if they'll perform well at coding. But that's only very less, because we generally, even for our complete program, we basically check if you know 7th grade mathematics, as compared to a normal college which goes to a crazy extent of maths. Then once a student is in NavGurukul, we really to begin with, we don't scare her with a lot of code. To begin with, we try to make them solve a lot of different puzzles, a lot of make them play a lot of different games, through which they're forced to run their mind in a way which is expected out of a programmer. They're forced to start thinking in that logical, structured, flowchart-like method. They're forced to ensure that, I'm doing a stepwise thinking in terms of different cases, but they are not really coding, sitting on a laptop, punching out some things and getting some stuff done. Like they might be solving a maze where they have to make a robot go from place X to place Y, and they would have to use a lot of programming fundamentals to do that. So that way, there's a lot of fear that, what is this code thing, or what needs to be done, which we get out before actually getting the student introduced to proper code. And even when there's a lot of proper coding happening in the program, there's a lot of peer support that is there. So I think it gets very difficult to learn coding on your own. And generally in a traditional setup, a lot of times that support doesn't exist in the form of different peers, teachers and everyone. So here, there's all people from all across, from a person who knows it really well to a person who's just joined 10 days before you. There are people from different strata who are there to help you, and it's the system is designed in a way where it's their responsibility to help you. It's also in their favor to help. So I think both of them things combined get the fear out slowly and slowly.